Hi, everybody. My name is Ember Kelly, and I am the Director of Religious Education at Fourth Universalist Society in the city of New York. Thanks for watching this video today. This is part of our Learning with Fourth online digital learning curriculum as we face the challenges of this Corona time. This month's themes are, it's kind of a dual theme this month, is identity and community. And I figured what better way to talk about community than with two people instead of one. You can't really talk about identity well, or I can't really talk about community alone. And so I have also from Fourth Universalist, one of our amazing lead teachers, Katie Garcia here. So Katie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So my name is Katie Garcia. I'm a member of the Fourth Universalist community. I've also been the lead teacher for our youth group for about a year now. I'm a lifelong Unitarian Universalist, and beyond that, kind of my day job is as a crisis and communication consultant. So that's me in a nutshell.
Crisis. You staying busy with quite a few crises going on recently.
It's been a busy time for the industry. That's definitely true.
So, with our first theme, we'll dive into identity first. When I say the word identity, what does that kind of mean to you?
Oh gosh, I think it means so many different things for different people. It's both how you see yourself and how you reflect yourself to the world, and those two different things don't always match. And what I found in my own life, as well as in doing research around this topic, is that the more we're able to bring those two pieces together, oftentimes the better off and the more full and whole and healthy we feel. So that's kind of identity, kind of in a macro sense, for me at least.
Yeah, when I feel that relates back to some of what we talked about in the last month with self-understanding, is that identity comes from this ability to kind of begin to piece ourselves together as a whole and to see ourselves. And I think that resonates with my experience as a trans woman. Um, you know, there's there's been both a sense that I like knew that I was, but also that sense that I had to figure out what that meant for me and how do I understand myself and how do I then identify myself. And it's the that coming out process can be an interesting way of coming to terms with identity.
Very true. Yeah, I'm also queer, and what I found is like it's a process that never, like, as soon as it starts, it doesn't really
Mm.
end. Like, it starts with yourself, and it starts with just trying to understand who you are and try to find, okay, is this a term that fits for me? No. Okay, well, what actually does? Where do I fit in this? And then once you start to communicate that with other people, it also starts to shift your view, and you also have to kind of be able to really own it. And because people, unfortunately sometimes like to give opinions that are not always nice about your identity. That's a very nice way of putting it. But when you're stuck with people kind of constantly kind of questioning or calling into question the validity of your identity, you have to become really firm in stating who you are. But at the same time, that can change too, because then you go off and you experience things and you end up, continuing to grow in your development. So, for me, I came out as bi, to other people at least, when I was 15. And something that kind of shifted over time is kind of gaining a greater understanding about the fact that that term bisexual or bisexuality exists strictly within the binary. And so that isn't actually very reflective of where I am, where I can love and I'm attracted to people of all genders. And so pansexuality works better, but nobody knows what that term really means except in the queer community. And if I were to say that, frankly, I know some people who would just assume I'm in a sex cult. So queer then becomes the safer term to use. And that's the thing that happened over the course of 10 years. And so it really just never stops. And you're constantly learning more about yourself in the process of becoming who you are.
Right. I think, I know when I was growing up in a much more conservative setting, that it was like it was the non-denominational Christianity. So it was, we don't want to identify with a specific brand of Christianity, but they actually very clearly had certain beliefs that were very set in stone. Like, we're just Christians, but that identity meant something. But everything was always like defined as like that these people are putting their identity above Jesus, above their faith. And identity was such this dirty word, and I think that's culturally still a thing that a lot of people see identity as like, I'm putting myself in a box. Like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to have to be in a box. But like, it's only really a box if you never ever change. Like, it's okay to evolve. It's okay to be becoming a new person.
Yeah, like the way that society talks about these things is so limited and ignores the complexity of who we are. Like, we are deeply complex human beings, and we have such an like enormous plethora of identities, and not a single thing fully defines us. That's all of it together in all of its imperfection combined. And I was really lucky in that I was a born and raised GU, and so I had kind of a far more kind of accepting community in which I could be in during that time when I was trying to figure out things. And I had kind of just an exposure and like an awareness of people of kind of different gender identities and of different sexual orientations. But at the same time, you then also get limited by that experience and that exposure. I know for me, I grew up surrounded by gay and lesbian people, but not really much else, at least not that I was aware of at the time. And so when I was trying to start to figure out who I was, I didn't know bisexuality was a thing. I didn't know that there was another option out there, which sounds very bizarre, but at least for, I think, our generation, there wasn't the same level of awareness. There wasn't a vocabulary for it. And so for years, like, there was a part of me that's just like, am I broken? Is there something wrong with me? This doesn't seem to fit anywhere. And it wasn't until 3 years after I realized I was different that I even became aware of that term. And suddenly it was like the lights came back on. And it's like, oh, there's not something, I'm not a freak. There's not something wrong with me. Like, there's a place out there with people like me who understand this, and where I'm not, I'm not foisting something on people. I'm not trying to like radically change the world, or like I'm change the paradigm of what it means to be queer. We're all out there. Like, there every thing that you can imagine is there, and there's so much beauty in that. And we don't get to see it often. And so then it becomes like identity then becomes a political statement, which it shouldn't be, because it's not seen as kind of part of our society in the way that it should be. That was a bit ranty, I know, but I have feelings on the topic, if you can tell.
It's okay to have feelings on the topic. That's part of your identity. But I think what you're saying, and even before when you were talking about like having others, being involved in a congregation, and like you knew gay and lesbian people, but you didn't know that there was a bisexual community. So like, I guess my next question would be, what role did community play in coming to understand like your own identity?
It was a bit of a two-way street there, and or that's not even the right analogy. It was the double-edged sword. There's a part of it where I
Streets
felt
and
held.
swords are quite different.
I know. This is why you need coffee. That's a very you thing to say, but it's why coffee is important. So there were ways in which I felt like there was safety in that. I knew from just like a very general level that I had people in my life and I had a community that was going to accept me for who I was. At the same time, I didn't necessarily take into account that, just like I didn't have a full understanding of the terminology that applied to me or what that identity meant, even in progressive spaces, there's times when that still is true. And that was the part I didn't anticipate, and the way that I kind of then had to kind of shift to some ways, like how I presented myself or how I talked about things. So there was a part that kind of gave me permission to be who I was. But like I think with so many others, and I was really lucky to be in a space where people were accepting. You still also have to deal with the fact that there's just not a lot of awareness. There's so much more now, thank God, than, 10, 15 years ago when I was first coming out. But there's still like this lack of vocabulary understanding that can really undercut you in those beginning days, because people will say things or do things and not realize how detrimental that is or how hurtful that is. And you kind of have to figure out, and you do it, I think, over time. Do I kind of close myself off and stay inside, or kind of not showcase this to the world? Or do I say, you know what? You've got things to learn. I'm proud of who I am. I celebrate who I am. And I'm going to kind of create a community that does specifically that celebrates who I am fully. And, thankfully, I've found that community. And I know a lot of other people in Fourth U have found that community at Fourth U, and with the friendships that have been formed and the groups that have been formed. And I think more and more those communities are popping up. So I think you need a space where you know that you can be safe to fully be who you are. And then in the process of kind of navigating that, you're able to even kind of, we in the queer community, we talk a lot about the idea of your chosen family. You're able to figure out your chosen family and your chosen community through the experience of trial and error to some degree.
Right. I was thinking about chosen family myself. I mean, as someone who comes from a background where like the communities, the evangelical college that I was coming out at were not necessarily this big affirming community that was going to be okay with me. I had to identify the people that could be close to me, that could be alongside that journey with me, and find that chosen family. And even now, like with the friends and family that were lost because of transition and stuff like that, like now we have lots of aunts and uncles for our kids that aren't necessarily biologically their aunts and uncles, but because they've walked along this journey with us, like that bond is so much more than even just friendship, that it does really feel like that they're family to us. And yeah, that chosen family feeling, it's a beautiful concept, this idea of like choosing to see people as family, and redefining family. Because I think that like in America, especially having lived abroad a little bit, that like even the family like system is so individualistic. Like there's not really much of an idea of like community, or like community space, or family time, or like everything's very like uh, I'm an individual, and sure, I'm related to these people, but that's about it. And having that community, having that family, whether biological or chosen, that you can feel safe to be around, like that's important in people's lives.
Yeah. And I think it does also tie back into this idea of finding yourself, because as you
Mm.
find your chosen family, you learn so much more about yourself, like in the journey of that, like what you will and will not tolerate, and who you are within that space and what you need. And like it very much goes hand in hand. They grow together as you're figuring out who you are and what you need. You find that community that does that, that will support you in times of need and challenge you at times when you need to be challenged to think differently and to widen your own mindset and your own understanding of who you are and who others are. So it really is beautiful, and I think it captures far more clearly than I think a lot of other simplistic narratives does, like the complexity that is us as people.
Definitely. So, kind of a last question for us to ponder. And I think you've already kind of gotten at it in talking about Fourth. Which 3 months in, I definitely do love the community. Coming up on 4 already. Time's flying here. Um, so, what exactly, to you, in your mind, does a community that's a good place for developing this self understanding, for developing your identity? What does that kind of community look like to you?
Yeah, I think I have touched on this a little bit, and Fourth has definitely been one of those places for me. A good community, a place where you can find yourself, I think for me is one where they have the ability to hold space for you and will celebrate you in that space. And at the same time, they will also help you broaden your own horizon and your own understanding of the world and people, and that leads you to reflect more on who you are. You need that kind of space where you're safe to grow and safe to own who you are. And it's one of the things I'm most proud of being a UU, is the way that we've done that for the queer community, and for people like us. Um, and Fourth U is definitely, I felt that, and I felt the ways in which people from the fourth community have very much become my chosen family, um, and it's because they did exactly that. They're there to celebrate in times of joy and hold your hand in times of hopelessness and despair.
Beautiful. Um, and I think it's that level of vulnerability. Like you can't have this real connection if you're not really able to be vulnerable with each other. I have from How to Love by Thich Nhat Hanh. I had a quote that kind of tied in to what we were talking about here. It's called "The Art of Offering Happiness." So let's see, he says, in a friendship, we try to offer our friend happiness. Sometimes you think that you're doing something for someone else's happiness when actually your action is making them suffer. The willingness to make someone happy isn't enough. You have your own idea of happiness. But to make someone else happy, you have to understand that person's needs, their sufferings and desires, and not assume that you know what will make them happy. Ask, what would make you happy? So these communities where we can be vulnerable with each other and where we can acknowledge that we all have difference, that like we different things are going to make us happy, different we have different emotional needs at different times. If we can do that, then we can really be this community where we can develop as ourselves and in our identities.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. It's that exact ability to recognize and celebrate the things that are unique and beautiful about us and only us, um, that bind us together, and that's where empathy is born, is the ability to really recognize and sit in that space.
I think that is a beautiful note to end us on. So, Katie, thanks for joining us for this YouTube video today. Thank you to all of our watchers, you guys out there, for tuning in as well. We will be having at least one or two adult education videos every month as part of the Learning with Fourth curriculum. So, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.